This is a special, unusual moment in a Dharma talk. I'm Sister True Dedication, and sitting with us we have Joe Confino, who is a journalist, and some of you may have read his wonderful articles about Thai in The Guardian. They've been circulated widely in our community. And his partner, Paz Perlman, Paz Perlman, I have to say it right. And Paz is an artist. And I'm going to ask them a few questions to explore their journey of practice with their work. And they first met our community in Thai in 2010. Okay, wow. When Thai was giving a retreat in the UK. And from then they had a lot of opportunities to interview Thai and be with Thai and start to bring the practice more into their life and bring a lot of change to their life. And we've had a few informal Dharma discussions about right livelihood in the last few days. And all of us agreed that right livelihood isn't one decision that we make when we are 18 or 22, or it's not one decision what career we will have. It's not just, but it can include a decision to change our career. But it's something that evolves every day in our working life, in all the decisions that we're making. It's a kind of journey. So I'm going to ask them some questions about their journey, and I'd like to start with Paz. So Paz has been a very successful commercial artist for about 10 years. And after having met Thai, something changed. And Paz, I think you realized something about your life as an artist and about your connection to your art. And Paz made a very radical decision to abandon her work, abandon her studio, and to go back to art school. And this was about 5 or 6 years ago. 4 years ago, okay. So I'd like, first of all, to ask Paz, why did she do that? What was wrong?
Just to say, if you see something rolling on the ground, it's my heart. So I need it back. Thai, dear Sangha, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity, because in the last 2 days, it's really forced me to go deeper into looking into it. So, in order to, I mean, it sounds like a simple question, but it sums up 20 years of my life. And to be able to communicate it with you, I need to capsulate it and maybe go a little bit back in time, so the information that I'm going to share about my current time will have some context. So, do I have a lot of time or shorter? 1.5 minutes. 1.5 minutes. Okay. Okay.
What was wrong with the art of swimming pools?
Okay. So, So, when I was experiencing a bit of success in my art around 10 years ago, I realized that I'm very unhappy. And it was a bit of a contradiction, because from one hand, I wanted to be successful, but then when it happened, I wasn't. And I had to look into that, and it's more that now I understand it in retrospective, that I chose to work with materials that didn't allow me, that there were a few reasons why I wasn't happy. One of them was that I chose to work with material that didn't allow me to combine the practice of Buddhism and what I felt so strong about wanting to show anti-matter through matter. And in order to do that, I chose stones. So working with stones doesn't allow, it's a very big challenge to do that. And then I was very frustrated that people didn't understand my process and the deep connection I have with my work, because my work look very aesthetically and they were responding to the aesthetic of them. And that caused me to be more commercial because the material I used was expensive and I needed to sell it expensive. And I got in touch therefore with rich people, and I present my work in all kinds of parks, and people would come and look and decorate their swimming pool with those sculptures. And I felt that there is a gap between how I feel inside, and I couldn't merge my life. It was like the Dharma is here and my artistic life is there, and I can't merge them. And that was a moment when I decided to. It was also, there was another thing, because there was money involved. I felt very much like people value my work through money, and therefore I'm starting to be dependent on their judgment. So if they buy my work, I'm a good artist. If they don't buy, I'm a bad artist. And it was also, I worked at that time in a studio with people that became friends, but actually there was an underspoken jealousy, and I suffered from it a lot. I remember the first retreat I came to Plum Village. I spent a long time with Brother Fablai and Brother Fablin talking about that suffering of jealousy and being subject of jealous and being myself jealous and competition.
And then you went to school, and at Central St. Martin's, a very prestigious art school in the UK, you started to discover something deeper inside that you could bring to your art. And I think that was the point when you really managed to find something deep inside that was much more closely connected to the practice. And so I wonder if you could share a little bit how your art changed and became much closer to your spiritual path. Yeah.
Okay, so I so much see parallelity between my, and now I see that between how I practice and how my artistic art was, path was joining. So when what I told you before was when I was also practicing Tibetan Buddhism, and it put me too much in the intellect, and I'm not so much orientated that way. I'm more down to earth, and I like simplicity, and therefore I think couldn't translate this high concept of emptiness and non-matter and energy into matter. But then when I met Thai, my aspiration changed, and all I wanted to do is just to walk the talk and just to be able to do what he does, which is walking the talk, which is, there is no gap there. And I think the change came with this. It took me a few years, and then the painful feeling I felt with the competition. So I stopped completely going outside with my art. And at that time, out of the completely blue, we lived in Brighton at the time, in UK, and I started to collect all kinds of broken, fragmented materials that the sea would bring to the shore. And it was quite specific. It wasn't like, battles of plastic or environmental. It was more like fractions of broken things. And I didn't know why I'm doing it. I was completely obsessed. And I started to make really works from garbage, basically, and knit them and weave them and make all kinds. Now I know that it was like nests, but I didn't understand it at the time. And when I decided to go to school in order to, because I was, till then, I was a self-taught. So I decided to see if there's a context to what's going on. And, it's become very obsessive work. And you don't learn much in art school, but they give you space. And in that space, I could see that I'm actually trying to heal history, and therefore I'm attracted to those materials. And it's not only my own history. I've been born in Israel, And I've been very much exposed to impermanence from young age. In my family, my mom was very sick, and all through my life, and the wars and the weight of the Holocaust, and suddenly a place that I ran away from at the age of 18, refusing to do the army and not wanting to do anything with this place. This place started to come in my art and showed me that I actually want to heal myself and my ancestors.
So it's a big step from large sculptures made of stone for rich people's swimming pools, but looking like the outer form of success, to finding trash on the beach and using that trash and the transformation of it to make beautiful artworks, exploring your own journey of practice and healing and transformation inside. And you also shared with us the other day that the very way that Paz is finding materials for her art and bringing the art together is a kind of mindfulness practice where you really keep that openness of mind that was mentioned this morning, a spirit of uncertainty, not knowing, and intuition to kind of explore and create your art. And then there was another big change just last year. So both Paz and Joe moved from the UK and took a radical step, and both of them took a new direction in their careers. And so for Paz, that then meant being an artist in New York, which is much closer to our Sangha. So we have the Blue Cliff Sangha close by, and I think the two of them actually helped set up a new regular Sangha in the area where we have Thai calligraphies in downtown New York. So I think the Sangha also had a bit of an impact on your art, and maybe you could share a bit, having gone deep inside for your inner healing, then what started to happen last year?
A lot happened last year. We moved to New York a year and a half ago, and I just suddenly, after maybe 5 years of not presenting my works anywhere and just cooking basically what's going on, the new change. New York is like a mecca for art. I don't know if you have this experience. It's like art is growing on the trees, and I just felt that I have also going to all the museums and exhibitions. So I felt like I have artist ancestors, and that I'm not alone, because for many years I felt very much in my own bubble. And just aside to that, society or the world have been always a difficult place for me. I always felt like I don't fit anywhere, and including sanghas. So I've been, before Thai, I've been in 2 other sanghas, and one of them I've been burned out, and the other one I had other difficulties. And when I came to Thai, I felt like this is a safe place, as a safe teacher and a safe place, and I want to find a way to fit. But it took me, I think, like now 10 years that I'm practicing in this tradition. So altogether it's like 20 years to have the feeling that I really want to join the club, you know. And I finally, I'm now an aspirant for an OI, and
The 14 mindfulness
14 mindful trainings. And with that, I think by doing this leap inside me, I feel like the world did a leap towards me. And suddenly all those opportunities are coming. So I'm now going to have a 3rd exhibition in New York. And all of them are so accurate to how my practice is. The first one was about trauma. And I could...
Trauma.
Trauma, yeah. I could express a lot around that. And it wasn't alien to my practice and what I discover in my journey of healing. The second exhibition was with Joe just recently, a day before we came to the retreat. We actually just distilled the exhibition. And it was about impermanence and about how we both works in different mediums, how we relate to each other. And in 2 weeks, I'm having my first solo exhibition, and I call it Before Thought. It's my aspiration to to live in that place before thought, and also it's the place where I feel that I'm creating from. And I'm so happy that I can join. It's finally happening that way, that I can join my personal practice of the Dharma with my artistic practice.
And Shanghai.
Ah, yes, and yeah, lots of opportunities. Two of my works, I mean, one is not made yet, it's just an assignment, and one is there. Have been chosen to be in an international exhibition in Shanghai next summer, which will tour the world, and it's an activist exhibition around abusement of women during time of conflict and war. And there is all kinds of other things. I'm still cooking this offer, but I might go to the occupied territories in Israel and give a workshop on art and healing, which I've done in Brooklyn a few months ago. And
so I think this is what you describe. Now your art is not for like show, it's not for showing, but it's really for sharing insight, for sharing your own journey of healing, healing your country, healing your ancestors. Wonderful. And this is something you've really done together. So it is great to have spiritual friends, and I think it's always wonderful also to have a partner who also practices, and then you can be very brave and support each other. And I think it makes it possible to take maybe these big steps in your life when you have someone to take refuge in and support you. So I'd like to ask Joe a little bit. What happened to you? So Joe was a senior editor at The Guardian newspaper in the UK, which is a very big national newspaper, but it also has one of the biggest news websites in the world. And Joe was a senior editor there with a great team. It's a very progressive newspaper, full of lots of social justice values and so on. So this looks very comfortable. So when you're in that position, also writing great articles for our community, why did you want to leave that? What happened?
The reason I left was to join the Huffington Post in New York, and that's because I met Arianna Huffington in the World Economic Forum in Davos 2 years ago. And essentially, after meeting her a couple of times, she said she wanted me to come and embed sustainability, purpose, and consciousness into the newsroom in New York. And the Huffington Post is one of the biggest websites in the world. It reaches around 180 million people a month. It has more than 1 billion video views every month. It has huge scale. It's in 17 different locations in the world. And that was an offer I couldn't refuse, because actually, again, like Paz, the reason I always wondered, why am I a journalist, and do I want to stay in journalism? And the reason I do is because it's this extraordinary platform, as Sister Jina said. It sort of reaches huge amounts of people. It informs, it educates, it sort of gives people the knowledge to create change in the world. And also, I'm very aware that, The Guardian, it reaches one type of audience, which is a very engaged, informed, educated audience. And I recognize that actually, if we're going to create the change in the world and the collective action that Sister Jina talked about, we need to reach many more people and many more sort of ordinary people, not just more of the sort of the next phase of change has to be about a collective awakening, can't just be a tiny group, it has to then go to the next group of people. And so I took the job because actually that's what I think we need to do. We need to wake people up, and that means, and I happen to be a journalist, and that is a place I can make a difference.
Did Thai have anything to do with this?
Well, you have to go back further in time, because Sister Trudeau Cation reminded me the other day, and I'd forgotten, although I hadn't forgotten at the time, was that when Thai gave a talk at the House of Lords, I asked him a question about the purpose of journalism, and he basically, I can't even remember exactly what he said, but he basically looked me in the eye and said, sort of, what are you doing to create change in the world? And that was a sort of very powerful, because with Thai it's a bit like a lightning bolt. Sort of when he looks at you and tells you something, it's sort of... and I don't see anyone who's ever said no to Thai and got away with it. So I thought I'd better say yes. And that is the sort of the teaching. I mean, you know, as Sister Jina talked about, it's about saying, actually, what can I do to make the change? And I think just in a way that Paz did, just to go back in time a bit, because I was, in my early time at The Guardian, I was running the business and finance section, and also feeling very unhappy when I look back, because actually I'd fallen into that particular position by chance, and I could never connect to it, you know, because it was all about share prices and mergers and acquisitions and currency movements. And I could never find my place in it because I couldn't see the humanity in it. Because for me, business was all around its connection to society and its impacts on society, but that was never discussed in the mainstream press. And then I was doing some personal development work, but it wasn't Buddhist, it was a sort of psychological, spiritual training. And I had an epiphany, a very powerful epiphany, and it was brought about on this weekend workshop. And the genesis of it was that the project leader was speaking to somebody else. He was working with another member of the audience, and he said, one of your gifts is that you can take people's pain, you can burn it in the furnace and transform it into a blessing. And when I heard that, that was another lightning bolt, because actually I thought that's who I want to be. That's what my purpose is. And it was such an instant connection to my purpose that I went back to The Guardian on the Monday morning. It was a weekend workshop, and I went to see the editor-in-chief and spent an hour and a quarter with him, telling him everything I felt that was going wrong in The Guardian and everything I wanted to do about it, because what I recognized was that while The Guardian was this beacon to the outside world, internally there was a lot of unhappiness and a lot of dissent, a lot of abuse and a lot of poor behavior. And I was working with a consultant, and she had come in and said, after a week, she said, "Oh yes, you're just like any other liberal institution where you shine this light outside and all the darkness gets internalized and not dealt with." And I realized that at that time that I wanted to step up and align our behavior to our purpose, because I felt, through that process, I felt this very attuned to this idea that there's an energetic transference, that if you are not living your truth, the truth you speak about, even if there's truth in it, doesn't hold the same value. And so I set up a program which I ran for 12 years called Living Our Values, and it just went through everything The Guardian was doing. So where we bought our paper from, where we bought our detergent from, how much we paid our cleaning staff, how much we paid our security staff, how we treated the people we interviewed, who we purchased from, how the relationships, what about diversity. So basically taking every issue that was relevant to our purpose and turning the spotlight back from outside of the world and turning it on ourselves. Because the thing about journalists, a bit like therapists, is that it's very easy to try and change other people. And sometimes we try to change other people or have a viewpoint to protect ourselves from changing. And I see a lot of that in the world, that people, even in people who have a good livelihood, are actually internally being very abusive and actually using that right livelihood to mask their own pain.
I think what's very inspiring hearing the both of you of how it becomes a very interior applied kind of practice. So both your own integrity and then the integrity of the places where you're working and helping others be the people they would like to be around you. And so when you moved to New York and the Huffington Post, that was in a way, I think, born from your aspiration to serve, to reach more people. But some of us had a chance to visit the offices there, and it's not quite such a... it's not the same environment as The Guardian, and I wonder if you encountered any challenges there. So it may have you may be able to reach more people and have more impact with your work, but what were the challenges for you on a more daily basis in terms of living your dream each day, not just in the kind of consequences of your work?
Yeah, well, one of the contexts is that the traditional media is facing a very tough time financially. And so there's this constant pressure to perform. So you need to be on every platform. You need to be on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram and on Snapchat. So there's this need to expand while your finances are shrinking. And so there's always this pressure to go for traffic, because the only way media companies make money is through advertising. The only way you get advertising is through scale, through traffic. So there's this tension to always drive scale, because that brings in the income that allows you to survive. And it's very easy to get lost in that and forget actually about what the purpose is. And I think one of the great things about the Huffington Post is just, because Arianna Huffington left about 2 months ago, is that the senior team got together and we said, actually, what is our purpose? And that was very much about going back to the basics, about saying what is our role in the world? And so we've rewritten our mission statement, which is around the things we care about: social justice, giving a voice to those who don't have a voice. So on Standing Rock, we've done a lot of coverage. And also allowing a lot of freedom of thought. So we have a big voices section, which is black voices and queer voices and Asian voices. And so that's about sort of coming back to the heart of the matter. And I think that journalists, most people go into journalism because they want to make a difference, and then they get sucked into a system that creates huge pressures and prevents them from doing what they want to do. So I think the most important thing is just to, any newsroom, to come back to the heart of the matter. I think the other thing generally with journalists is that, so one of the things I came in to do was to create this model of solutions journalism. So rather than just talking about the problems in the world, is to talk about what's going right and how we make a difference. And I experienced that at The Guardian before I left, where we ran this big campaign against fossil fuels, which was very effective, but all the people came back to us and said, yeah, but you're telling us about the problem, but what about the solutions? And that presents a problem for journalists, because journalists by nature tend to be quite cynical and tend not to take things at face value, which is great, but also tend to focus on what's going wrong. And I think that's a real problem, the cynicism of journalists, that actually we need to get people back to saying, actually, what is working? So what I've just set up in the last couple of months is a team that's not focusing on news, because again, news can be overwhelming and it can suck. There's so much news, how do you cope with it? I think audience feels overwhelmed, I think journalists feel overwhelmed. But to set up a projects team which is around campaigns. And that's very much inspired by Ty's work. So two of the campaigns I set up one 4 months ago, which was around waste. So it was called Reclaim, and it was around food waste and fashion waste, and we'll do plastic waste, and it's showing how we need to move from a linear economy of build, use, throw away to a circular economy where we're designing things to constantly be reused. And I've just got funding for a year-long project on neglected diseases in Africa and around the world. So 1 billion people suffer from diseases that can be cured, but the big pharmaceutical companies can't make a profit from it, so they don't invest in it. And then two ones particularly related to Thai. One is around activism. So I think post the Trump election, there are a lot of people saying, how do I act? And I think this is the heart of Thai's teaching, is saying not to sit on a cushion, but to go and create change in the world. But I think we need to retrain people about, a lot of people went from citizens to consumers and thought action was just through what they buy, and we need to get back to a position where it's about how you act in the world and how you use advocacy. And the second project is around falling back in love with Mother Earth, and that's something that I felt very deeply from Thai, around seeing the planet as a sort of the Gaia model of it's alive and it's precious and we need to protect it. So in 2 years' time, there's the 50th anniversary of the Earthrise picture, which was the first picture taken from space of planet Earth. And that led to the sort of start of the environmental movement, because it was the first time of a change of consciousness that the world is not infinite, but actually from space it's tiny and precious and in this enormous ocean of darkness. And one of the Thai's teachings, when I interviewed him, he said, I said, why do people not act on climate change? And he said, people are suffering in their own lives, and when they're suffering in their own lives and don't know how to deal with it, how do you expect them to work in terms of healing the planet? And he said, we need a collective awakening. And so this project is, in a tiny way to try and contribute to a collective awakening, because people are very disconnected. And I think I'm feeling disconnected. I'm working in this field constantly. I feel disconnected from it. I don't feel the grief of it very often. We have to find ways of reconnecting people to what's going on in the world beyond their intellectual understanding, because that hasn't helped to a deep feeling and a deep connectivity of the pain of what we're creating and how we can reduce that pain, and how the pain we're creating to the planet will be our own pain. And so that deep understanding of the interrelationships and interdependence.
Wow. It's wonderful to hear these projects and to see the fruits of your aspiration. I have a cheeky question I want to ask, which is, are you any happier?
Yeah, and yeah, hope so. I mean, and one of the things you mentioned, and just to say about, doing this in relationship, we are a Sangha, and I see the reason I've been able to step out in my life is because of the love and support of Paz, and also we do the work ourselves as best we can, not very effectively, but every week we have what we call Friday Talk, where we do beginning anew, and that every Friday we go to a cafe and we go through the process of what have we enjoyed about each other, what have we found difficult, and finish off by sort of with an expression of our love, and that holds us together, because it provides support, but also it challenges us. It says, this is what I'm finding difficult about you, or this is what I'm noticing about you. And I think that holding of the space and the love and the fact that we're practitioners together, and that just makes all the difference. It's given me the courage to go out into the world. I don't know if it's given Paz. Paz should answer that.
No.
So I think both of you, in your relationship, in your practice life, you're cultivating this kind of compassion and courage. And there was just one more thing, just to finish up, I wanted to touch on, Joe, that you, in your relationship with your colleagues, we were talking about how can we apply the mindfulness trainings in the workplace, and especially the fourth training about speaking out, not repeating untruths. And in the 14 mindfulness trainings, we have the line, I vowed to speak out against situations of injustice, even if it somehow endangers my own position. And I would just like to invite Joe to share a little bit about that, because I think that's very alive in many workplaces, no matter what we're doing. Things that we see, things that we hear, the relationship between our colleagues. And as a practitioner, you're also a kind of big brother, an elder brother, even in the Huffington Post. Many of your colleagues are much younger. So how are you supporting them? How are you bringing this aspect to life in your work?
So in terms of my colleagues, I think one of the things is to remain calm. and also to recognize sort of the level of pastoral care we can each give each other. So just to be there to listen to people, just to be there to love people. Actually, I mean, that's one of the things I love about the Huffington Post. There's no one there I can't love. And when I see it as an expression of love, then actually everything can work. And even when it's difficult. And the other thing I have to say that's helped me is Thai's teaching, and the Buddhist teachings of impermanence. Things are constantly changing at the Huffington Post. And I'd been 23 years at the Guardian, and the Guardian for me was safety. It was my Sangha, my home, and so coming to Huffington Post was a real shock because it was constantly changing. but actually the training I've had on impermanence is really helpful because it allows me to, in a sense, learn from Thay's teaching on sort of the historical dimension, the ultimate dimension. That on the historical dimension, a project I might be creating matters hugely to me. It's really important. It could change everything. And on the ultimate dimension, it doesn't really matter. And so if it works, that's great. If it doesn't work, that's also great. And so I think that whole sense of losing expectations, I think because I've let go, because I don't know the answer, and actually Thay's teaching around the ultimate versus the historical dimension has allowed me to commit more to my work. And it's perverse because most people think it would be the opposite, that if it doesn't matter, then you can't commit. But I think the fact of not knowing allows you to commit 100%. Whereas if you have an expectation, you're never committing 100%, you're committing only to your will. And so I think just to allow things, and that if someone does something I'm unhappy about, is to recognize that. And I'll feel pain and I'll feel frustration, and then to allow it.
Thank you. I'm nourished and inspired, and I hope the rest of the Sangha is too. And so we would like to thank the both of you for sharing deeply from your hearts, from your practice, and with such wonderful stories from your own real lived experience. So thank you so much. Maybe we can offer some flowers to Joe and Paz for their open-hearted courage this morning. Thank you.